scaling when you're not already making enough money means that you're likely going to be unprofitable as you scale. So you're going to, again, get into that I'm selling more projects to pay my team for the projects I've already built. We want to make sure that you're reasonably profitable as a soloist before you start to scale, because otherwise your pricing and positioning is off. Great point. Yeah, it's a fine line, isn't it, between like when to scale?
Welcome to the Web Design Business Podcast with your host, Josh Hall, helping you build a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hello, friends. Great to have you here in this episode. So excited to have a deep dive conversation into growing pains and how to scale your business, no matter what size you want to scale. Even if you want to remain a soloist, a solopreneur, but you don't want to do absolutely everything in your business. You'd like to delegate something off of your plate, which I recommend. That's what we're going to dive into. We're going to talk about the different growth stages in your business with what works for you and how to get through those, because every time your business grows, as exciting as that is, and as exciting as it is to make a lot of sales, that means you're going to have to grow in some way, or you're going to have to work more or delegate more. So to help us with this, I'm so excited to bring on Jessica Lackey, who is a consultant for all sorts of businesses and has a lot of skill set and a lot of really, really good advice with how to handle growing pains. And really what we dive into here too is how to figure out what to focus on in each stage of growth, which I found invaluable. Actually, I think you'll notice like halfway through this conversation, this really became a coaching call for me, because everything that we dove into with Jessica here is so what I'm going through. So if you are just starting to get overwhelmed and you're very, very busy and you're trying to figure out what to do next, where to take your business, you don't want to have a big agency and a lot of overhead, but you know you just cannot do everything on your own, I really think this conversation is going to help you a lot. And we're going to briefly dive into this lovely word that she has on her homepage at jessicalackey.com about how to avoid toxic productivity. I love that term because I do not love hearing all about productivity. I feel like priority is way more important than productivity. So yeah, we're very aligned here, and I think it's going to help you a lot. jessicalackey.com. She has some free stuff for you too at jessicalackey.com/welcome. So we'll bring that up here once we dive in. And I'm very excited to announce too that Jessica is going to be coming into Web Designer Pro at the end of this year in 2023 to do a guest expert training on scaling. So we'll take a more visual approach at this talk later on in the year. All right, for now, here is Jessica. Let's dive into where the heck to focus your attention in different growth stages of your business. Man, I enjoyed this one. I hope you do too. Jessica, great to have you on the show. I'm so excited to talk focus and attention shop today, if that sounds good.
Sounds great to me.
So we were just chatting before I hit record. My ideal customer in my business is a web designer who is growing, and they're in the growth stage period of like growing pains. And some of them are wanting to stay a solopreneur for as long as they can, like I did. Some are forced to scale, like I did. And then some actually have intention of scaling. So I think there's a lot of challenges in this area that I'm really excited to get your expertise on, if that sounds good for this conversation.
Sounds great. I'm excited to talk about it.
And what do you, when people ask you what you do, what is the quick answer? Do you have an answer for like your neighbor or your grandma versus an entrepreneur? What's your answer to that question?
I don't really talk to neighbors and grandmas. They just know I'm a consultant. But for your audience, I'm a business strategist and operations advisor, helping guide businesses through various trajectories of their business, because it's really important to find the right business model and size for you. And that's different for everyone. And that's what's really important about these phases of growth and phases of scale. Not every business owner wants the same thing, even though we're marketed something different.
Great point. Yeah, I mean, I struggled with that mightily when I was building my business, because I saw some competitors and some local friends who had like agencies, and I felt pressured like I should do that. But in my core, I just didn't want to do it. And I'm glad I ended up kind of listening to myself and not getting to that point. But I do see a lot of people who go that route because they just feel like they should. I'm personally really, really excited about the idea of lifestyle freedom over anything else right now, particularly in the way of like as an entrepreneur. Have you seen a shift in the landscape maybe in the last few years with that idea that people are less interested in growing the biggest business possible and people are really focusing on more life balance and lifestyle as a whole now?
I have really seen that, but it's interesting. I've seen it in two camps. There's the camp that says stay small and flexible so that you can retain that lifestyle design. And then the camp that says scale to build a team so that you don't do the delivery so that you can have that flexible design. So there's this, you can get that flexibility in multiple ways. Or then there's the other path, which is become a monetized course creator that talks about web design, and then you can create freedom that way. So everyone wants the freedom, but there's multiple paths to do it that all require creating a slightly different business and a business model.
That's well said. I have found that for sure. What I came to more recently was in the web design, there's really a few different types of web designers. There's freelancers who are just doing all the work, getting the clients themselves. There's solopreneurs who are doing all that, but they're also very business focused and working on the business. And then the business owners, like you said, who are scaling and who are solely working on the business and hiring things out. Neither path, though, I've said is right or wrong. So I guess, do you have any tips right off the bat on how we choose what path we want for like what season of life we want? Because it can change. It's changed for me for sure over the years.
Yeah, I would love to make sure that all of our freelancers who in our solopreneurs kind of merge, and that every one of our soloists, I call them the craftsmen, they are all business oriented and savvy, because I think that's how we go from being a vendor to a trusted partner. But I think there's the transitioning from that soloist model to the agency model. There's a shift in, do you want to lead people? And do you have enough marketing pipeline to generate the business flow that will sustain a team? And some people are like, nope, I just want to do my projects and I'll deal with the lumpiness on my end. And some people are like, I want to scale a business. But then it shifts the work from doing the design to leading a team. And that's a personal preference.
Yeah, good point. And I should say, with the idea of a freelancer, that's, at least in web design, that's the common starting point.
Right.
Most all freelancers, to your point, yeah, they do become a solopreneur, to where at some point they get to working on the business. You have to at some point. But it is a great place to start, because you can start working with clients and make partnerships and work for other agencies. But there is this shift where you do get business focused. I'm kind of curious, before we dive further into like how to figure out each growth stage, did you have intention of being an entrepreneur, Jessica, or did you kind of fall into it? Are you an accidental entrepreneur? Or?
I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I worked in big corporate. I worked for a consulting firm, McKinsey & Company. I worked for Nike in supply chain and operations. And I thought I was going to be the consummate corporate executive someday, until I realized that wasn't the life I wanted. Like, I didn't want that version of success. So I thought I was going to become a coach. And now have fallen into being a strategic consultant, kind of blending that corporate background with the coaching and entrepreneurial bent. But I never thought I was going to be a corporate executive with those golden handcuffs. Leapt out during COVID when I realized that I didn't want that version of success. I didn't want to be trying to work that hard to make that much money and like see my life kind of pass before my eyes. So I decided to take what I learned and serve a different population with different priorities in life.
Very common story. Do you feel like 2020 is when the idea of a fulfilling career kind of morphed into a fulfilling lifestyle with business? That's my take on it personally. I've just known so many people, my mom included, one time said she always wanted a career. But I don't know too many people now who are looking for a career. It is much more lifestyle. I wonder if that's when the shift happened big time.
I think it happened big time, because I think there's always the crucible moment that happens. A lot of times it happens for people in their mid 30s to early 40s, where you look around and you say, okay, I've been plugging along on the default path for a pretty long time. I look around and it's usually predicated by some kind of like health concern or financial concern or relationship, or, I've had children. But 2020 was a collective crucible moment where everyone had to pause and take stock of their life. And I'm not incentivized to do that on a regular basis. So to have that collective normalization of, we need to think differently about our lives, I think really put into place some of the underlying tension that had been bubbling up in the fulfilling career philosophy.
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely seems like it was the straw that broke the camel's back when it came to like, okay, I definitely don't need this. And there's got to be a better way. We were just talking before we went live. My wife has helped train my kids not to head to my door when I have calls, but my golden retriever did not get that memo. So let me let her in real quick. I'm going to let her hang in the office. Hold on one sec. All right, I have a couch on the other side here. So I actually have two golden retrievers who are in the office with me most days when I work here in the office. So got a couple of spies listening to this convo. But I love this idea, Jessica, because I think it sets the foundation for basically like how and when to scale. I mean, that really changes everything as far as your goals. So do you have any more thoughts on that before we move forward? Like how to figure out what you want, I guess that's kind of the question.
Yeah, I think I have a framework I talk about, the deeper business framework. I'm rolling it out as we speak. And the foundation of the deeper business is always like your mission. And I say the mission from who do you want to impact? How much money do you need to make? What's the scale you want? And I think and what's the role you want to play in your business? Do you want to be the front end in marketing and sales and operations for a web design agency? Or do you want to do the design? And I think there's this myth that you can't make a lot of money doing design. And I'm like, well, I think that's a myth. I think you can, as a very profitable soloist. You can also be a somewhat unprofitable agency owner. So I think there is a decision to be made of how much money do you need? What is your quote unquote enough number? And again, do you want to lead people? Do you want to be focused on lots of marketing because that's what's required to scale the agency? Or do you kind of want to just take projects when they come? Money is not the primary concern. Those are things that have to be decided in the mission part of your business framework.
Oh, I love that you said that. It reminds me, there was one point, there was a fellow like agency owner locally who I think was doing 7 figures. So they were $1 million+ design agency. And I was at like their $250,000 range. And I was personally taking more money home than he was with that 7-figure business. And I feel like that's very, very common. It looks cool to say like we're a 7-figure agency, but it does come down to like, what are the goals? What do you need? What's realistic? What seat do you want to be in your business? So I love some of these ideas because I feel like this is generally something that happens accidentally, like when you're fumbling your way through it. So I hope this is a really good time to make everyone listening and watching right now just to pause, really think about your business and where you want it to go. What you want it to be. So I appreciate you saying that because I think it's a really, really important time when we get to this juncture.
Exactly. And then as we grow and scale, there's the preparation phase. It's like climbing a mountain. The preparation phase where you're observing, you're watching, you're crafting your skills, maybe as the freelancer. There's the ascent phase where you're building your pipeline, your book of business, you're building your portfolio. And too often, business owners want to just keep on scaling. And we forget that there's a phase in the middle, like acclimatization, where if you keep just pushing, you're going to outstrip your systems and support. You're going to outstrip your marketing. You're going to outstrip your team workflows and processes. And too many people want to like push through that and just keep growing. Not enough people want to slow down at the point in time where they're about ready to hire some people and then start building processes, maybe with some freelancers that are just built based on projects. Start building those rhythms and operations processes, that marketing process, that sales process to say, am I really ready to bring on people? And have I gotten my back of house in order enough to be able to make the next push?
So that would be step one then, right? To basically organize your systems, basic SOPs, something to allow you to scale effectively. Otherwise, yeah, team building is a nightmare if it's all on you, because that could be a full-time job just training somebody.
Exactly. You had a podcast on recently about how to generate 16 leads a month. And that one has a very regular, robust marketing cadence, but you probably didn't need that as a soloist, but you certainly need those marketing systems as a agency. And, most of the time we're too busy building in the business to work on the business. Those are the types of systems you want to have in place and running well before thinking about expanding beyond occasional subcontractors.
And most people don't think about this. It came to me more recently. I actually had Mike McAllowitz on, and he said something that has just stuck with me like I don't know. And anything it's sticky. It has stuck with me. And that is that sales can actually be a very bad thing if your system isn't prepared for it. So you can, how common is this? This is what caused me to scale, as I had 23 projects on my plate. It was just one of those seasons where they all came on, which sounds amazing. Like I could have been like, yeah, I'm a web designer. I got 23 projects, but I was like, how am I going to fulfill this? I don't want to work 100 hours a week. How am I going to do all these? So I was kind of forced to scale. And it was just that mindset of like, I had sold too much. I sold over what I could fulfill, basically.
Yeah. And Mike also talks about the fact that those projects you might be selling might be unprofitable by the time you add those people. And so you have to then sell more in order to bring in the cash to fulfill and pay your contractors, which means it's the never ending cycle. If you don't take a moment to step back and say, am I actually making money on all the stuff I'm selling? Am I working with the right people? Or am I just selling to bring in the cash to pay my other obligations?
Good point. So I would imagine starting small. I mean, that's what I recommend. Is that kind of where you would start when it comes to creating systems and then bringing someone on? Do you agree with the start small approach? And if so, what does that look like for you? What have you seen work?
Yeah, I've seen bringing on people that are not permanent members of your team, but bringing on subcontractors and freelancers that are truly project based. But also, this is when you're going to want to make sure you bring on your accounting team if you don't have one, and make sure your books are in order. This is where you're going to make sure that you have someone on your team, either part-time or full-time, that's dedicated to project management, because I'm pretty sure if you're super creative at web design, you may not be as detail-oriented on the project side. And I think there's this myth that we have to bring on someone full-time to do that, but there's a lot of part-time administrative support that can help manage you while you manage your team. So I think starting small with like a couple of go-to freelancers versus thinking, how am I going to bring an entire team from 0 to 100?
Yeah, great point. What are your tips for accounting for the extra costs in those projects? Because this is one of the questions I get often from folks who are scaling, which is they're really excited to delegate, but then the question is, well, that's going to eat a huge chunk into the profit I would normally take. Now, I always say the thing is, once you get going on that, you'll be able to take on more projects if you want to. And of course, you can increase your rates. But what are your tips for that? Anyone who's hesitant to share the wealth, basically?
Well, I always say that look at your total revenue minus what you think you're going to pay your contractors for the work. And what's left over is your profit. If you are going to spend, and then think about the number of hours that you're going to spend delivering the work. If what's left is lower than your gross hourly rate for the amount of hours then it's not a profitable project for you. You're actually going to make more money not taking on that work with the subcontractor because too much of your time is in it, or you're paying your subcontractor too much money. Now, that's not an excuse to like cheap out on paying your people. That means that we need to raise the prices or streamline the work so that there's less of your time involved.
I love that you said that, because that's the first thing that most people have a hesitancy towards. It's like, well, I'm not going to raise my rates, so I just have to do it all myself. But what I found is that clients, particularly in web design, I think this is probably true for every industry, clients are not going to pay more just because a project takes longer. They'll actually pay more if it gets done faster. And this is where the true power of this idea of scaling effectively comes in, because if you can have somebody that helps you, yes, they'll take a bigger chunk, especially if they're a quality freelancer, but you might get the job done in 30 days rather than 60 days if it was just yourself because you're managing everything else. And the client is going to be thrilled about that. And they'll likely pay a lot more. I'd rather, when we got a fence done, I didn't want to pay less for a 2-week job. I paid more for a 2-day job, and it was worth every penny.
Yeah. And I think right at the get-go of starting to bring on people is when it sounds so tedious, but it's really important, is tracking your hours per project to really know how many hours am I spending on this? And 1, does my hourly rate support that? 2, how can I get things done more efficiently, faster? Because it's like you said, that's going to be better for my time, but it's also going to be better for my clients. There's less revisions, there's less back and forth, there's less chasing them down when the projects stay on schedule. And that's more profit for you and quicker value for them.
Yeah, good point. I want to dive further into the scaling model for those interested in that route. I am curious, though, for those who want to be a solopreneur for as long as humanly possible. First, maybe a 2-part question. Do you think that's even possible? And I guess part 2, how far, what does that model look like for somebody who's truly a soloist, a craftsman who's doing everything themselves? And what would they need to do to make that profitable and sustainable?
I think there's the soloist model. It's soloist plus. It's soloist plus a administrative support. It's soloist plus bookkeeping. It's potentially soloist plus some marketing help. So you're retaining all the design, but starting to think about like the back office tasks, the ones that keep the business running. Those bring on specialists, not generalists, because bring on people who are specialized in their function versus you having to teach and train. So that's one way to stay as profitable as possible. And the second is there's lots of shiny objects out there about how to grow your business and lots of ways you can spend money on exquisite branding and coaches and consultants. Be really thoughtful because that money could go into your pocket. It could also grow in your business, but I see too much paying for knowledge that we're not going to do anything with yet because we're a soloist. And I think a lot of that money could go back into your pocket as the owner.
Oh, well, you said you listened to that episode with Eric and about the leads, and he even said it on there. He's like, web designers in particular tend to be course hoarders.
Yes.
And I advise against that as a course creator. I'm like, I don't want you to just buy my course and sit on it. I want you to get a result. That's why I do what I do. So that's a really, really good point. Especially, I think it's worth saying that you should have a plan, an action plan when you go through any sort of training.
Yep.
Like I always advise, make it a project. That way you get something out of it. It's funny. We mentioned Jay Klaus before we went live. A local colleague of mine, he just released a little masterclass on creating a newsletter, which I'm doing here soon. And I purchased it, but I haven't taken it yet because I'm not ready to fulfill my action plan with it.
Right.
Now, when I go through that, it'll be a dedicated deep work segment, and I'm literally going to build mine as I go through it. And then we're ready to go. But I've also not perfected taking courses, but I've learned to effectively take courses over the years and get the most out of them.
Exactly. But I think the thing that I forgot to say that you just brought up is pick a marketing strategy, maybe 2, and do them. But don't flip from reels on social media to local networking to guesting on podcasts to email newsletters to hosting your own podcast. Because of course, every one of those requires some startup cost. Pick 1 or 2 social media platforms. Pick one way to stay in touch with people. That could be email. That could be just good old fashioned CRM, customer relationship management tool, or you just follow people. I think local networking and just communicating with people on a regular basis and an old school networking is the best way for soloists to stay profitable by nurturing those referral partners and not getting caught up in the hype of how to grow an audience. Because if you charge $10,000 a project, I don't know what, web design ranges these days are, but if you sell $10,000 a project and you sell 10 projects, that's $100,000. And you could probably find all 10 of those just in your network or your network's network.
Yeah. Great point. Somebody needed to hear that because it's 100% true. And a lot of people listening are probably charging 2,000 and they could have charged 10 and they probably should have charged 10. Ranges are typically right now US based, under 2,500s, like starter range, 25 to 5,000 or so is kind of mid. 5 to 10 is kind of the next level up. And then generally like 15 to 20 is more like enterprise style. But you're right. When it comes to scaling, like you're probably, I guess the mindset has to be shifted from, again, the quantity you can take on and the quality and the speed that you can do it in. And again, I think when you scale, I learned to feel much more confident charging $10,000 rather than I was a soloist, like you said. Have you seen that too with people you help scale? Do you find that their confidence and their mentality shifts because it's not just them, it's like a we instead of me?
I think it's the we instead of me, but it's also the fact that in order to scale, again, you've got to have rock solid systems in place because otherwise you're going to get dragged into all the minutia. So you've got to have a very clear point of view, a very clear process in order to make scale happen. And so by having that clear crystal process, by having to expand your presence enough to generate the kind of volume that scaling requires, you have to be really clear on your messaging. You have to be really clear on your process, really clear on your promises and outcomes. And by the time you scale, you have a track record of doing that for people. And you've got beloved clients who love you and are going to stay on your maintenance plans and talk about you. And so I think scaling requires confidence, but scaling gives you the confidence because in order to do it, you have to be pretty buttoned up in the foundational aspects of your business that will allow you to do that without grinding yourself to a crisp.
So probably not a shocker of a question, but how do we know when the right time to scale is? Is that a personal thing? Is it like, I mean, again, like me, I was kind of forced to. I was like, I literally cannot do all this myself. What have you seen as a good metric to know when it's time to scale?
I think it's time to scale when you're consistently oversubscribed and you've managed to you've gotten some really good relationships with some freelancers where you've had good success engaging them on one-off projects, because that's when you know your marketing is working. That's when you know you're consistently. That's when you know your onboarding and communication processes with your team are consistent. I would say that you want to be oversubscribed, but oversubscribed in a way where, let's say we wouldn't want you to bring all 23 projects at once. Like, how do you have a wait list? How do you have people saying, when can I next work with you? And you're saying, yeah, I've got two months out is my next opening consistently for a couple of months. And that at that point, you are making enough money take home to take on more projects. Because if not, then we know that scaling when you're not already making enough money means that you're likely going to be unprofitable as you scale. So you're going to, again, get into that I'm selling more projects to pay my team for the projects I've already built. We want to make sure that you're reasonably profitable as a soloist before you start to scale, because otherwise your pricing and positioning is off.
Great point. Yeah, it's a fine line, isn't it, between like when to scale, because you could scale too soon and be unprofitable, but if you wait too long, you get into my type of situation where it's like, oh, I should have scaled a little while ago. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that corresponds with that timing, but I do feel like that's a kind of a tight rope to walk there.
I'd rather have you, I'm always on scaling. I would err on too late than too early, because I do think that I know no one wants to say no to projects, but you want to be able to pick and choose your clients, be able to say, yes, I want to work with you. No, you're not a fit. If we're taking every piece of work that comes to us without, and we're getting, 85 to 100% yeses on our discovery calls, we're taking on too much work and we're not appropriately priced to really recognize the value of the work we're doing. We haven't changed our value to proposition and reflected that in our pricing yet. So we don't want to be forced to take on work once we've scaled. So like once you've scaled and brought on more people, if you're then going to be like, I have to take everything that comes to me in order to, keep my team, we don't want that to happen. I'd rather you err on the side of slower, more deliberate, which sounds so painful, but it in the long run means that there's going to be pent up demand to work with you and you're going to be seen as a hot commodity.
I love what you said there, Jessica, that approach of being either booked out or in a place where you can pick and choose projects. I think that's a great metric as far as knowing when to scale, because if you're saying yes to everything and you're desperate for projects, it is not time to scale for sure. So I think it's a great place to be in as far as not a red flag, but like a marker to say, okay, maybe this is kind of the next step. It is kind of funny. I see a lot of my students get to a point where they know it's up ahead, but they're either hesitant or they're not sure how long it should take. I mean, I think a lot of what we laid the groundwork here is going to help with that, but how long should that window be? Or is it like, if you feel like it's time to scale, do you feel like it's time right now? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the scaling process really takes 6 months. And to go from, I think I'm going to need to scale, to I feel like I'm in a place, because we want to spend the 3 months when you're like, scale is on the horizon, making sure your processes are on lock, making sure that,
good point.
You're ready to bring on people, documenting those SOPs, because I'm pretty sure that you didn't do that when you were soloist, right? Getting the business ready. And then you need to hire and bring on the right people. You may have relationships with them already, or you may need to look for new people. And then during the first, especially if you're working with new people to your organization, the first 2 to 3 months of anyone working with you, you're going to be training, you're going to be reviewing, you're going to be much more hands-on with their design work than you would be otherwise. And so we got to think about the time to prepare your business, and then the time to bring on and ramp up a team. And so this would be a project for a year to say, yeah, do you need to do that with one person? No. Do you need to do that when you're bringing on a project manager and a design assistant and maybe somebody else on your team? That would require some, a multi-month project to get you ready and to bring them on.
Yeah, well said. That's a great point about, if you're feeling that, like, that's the time to do the processes and systems, because that's the sign. And you're right. No one working for themselves as a soloist is likely. I mean, maybe the 1 out of 100 person who's just on it, but most of us, if we're doing everything ourselves, it's just in our head. Yeah. Like, why am I going to spend half a day to write that down? I know how to do it. But yes, I can't agree more. If you get that feeling, if you get that urge to be like, I think scaling is in some way is going to be next. Yeah, get it out. Start those processes. I love that reminder.
I'm a process person. I mean, I'm an operations strategist. That's what I do. And I brought on a team, operational support for me, and I'm having to change proposal processes, because the proposal process I use, I was like, I hate it, but it's what I know, and I'm just going to do it, right? But then I have to slow down. I have to make sure that getting them my brand kit, getting them set up in a task manager so we can share information, even like sharing passwords. Takes time to like work through what is all the information they're going to need. And it's not something that can be done quickly, because until you do projects, you're not going to know what steps are missing. So, the first 90 days of bringing anyone on is as much you training and learning how to be a manager as it is and a leader, as it is doing the work. So I always say, if you can, take on scale projects when you've got some cash buffer, and when it's potentially a slower time in your business to start putting those processes together. Then you'll know whether or not you're ready to bring on team members, because as you start documenting and looking at what it would look like for an outsider to be part of this, you're going to learn a lot.
Oh, that's great. Now, we've covered a lot about the focus and attention when we're preparing and getting ready to scale and starting to scale. But the next level back here, Jessica, like, once you're scaling and once you actually have some time freed up and you're kind of in a new role in your business, you do kind of get to this point where then the next decision happens, which is, what do I want to do now? Like, am I going to, and you kind of mentioned earlier, the marketing channels. It's really easy just to market more and stretch yourself thin that way. What's your advice for that next step once things are cooking? But now it's like, yeah, do you have to choose your role? Do you have to decide on what you're going to do in the business versus on the business? Is it a matter of taking scale to the next level? What's the next step?
This is where it's a little choose your own adventure. The first thing that has to shift is that your value is not hands-on keyboard time. And we're so used to being trapped at our desks for 40 hours a week or more that having white space on your calendar is scary for so many people. And this is the time where you say, where do I want to spend my time? What's the legacy I want to start to leave? Who do I need to be in community with to make everything else easier? What kind of message do my clients need to hear? For you, do you want to change and add parts of your business. So, maybe you go from a web designer to a web design business, or how to be a web designer, or DIY web design courses. I don't, like, those are the options. But I think that's where having the white space to simply not work and strategize and make partnerships and dream bigger, that's what happens. What I see too often is that's scary for a lot of people. And so what they do is they start micromanaging their team.
Gotcha.
And they start getting back in the weeds and start, because that's safe, it's comfortable, and they can exercise control there. But by being the doer, you never shift to the leader. And that's where scale goes sideways.
I love that you brought that up. Really, really common. I've seen that as well, where it's so easy, and I've done this myself. It's easy to revert back to the soloist when it's like, once you get to that point, I found it so crucial to say, this is my job. Even though I could do this in 3 minutes, I have to let my team know to do this, because that is not my job anymore. I love that reminder. I feel like and inevitably it happens, especially in web design. What a great reminder to like stick to your role. And I guess don't go backwards. Is that, or don't micromanage, don't dip into where you were. Is that kind of the motto?
Yeah. And I think this is where you then shift into team management and leadership to say, okay, if you're seeing these pockets, something's not right in the process. What do you need to document? Where do you need to train? Where do you need to teach? Where do you need to set up processes so that, you have, years of experience, and maybe you're working with someone who doesn't have that. So you see things that they can't. Your job shifts from fixing it to being their mentor, their coach, their leader, and making sure your processes are set up so that you can see those things in advance with enough lead time. So you're not having to make revisions 2 hours before a client handover.
Good point. Yeah, that is usually when it happens. And I know there's the rare occasion where it's like, okay, this has got to be done. But it is those times where it's like, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's where I've had to catch myself with those little tasks. Because for number one, they eat up in time, but then it does those are the things that just keep you back from being the next version of you as a business owner, I found.
Yep. But that's the scary part. That's the one that's going from web designer to agency business owner, and thinking about, the next service portfolio. How do you streamline your services? How do you productize even further potentially? Or how do you create the next level of bespoke web design services, or going on the speaker circuit? I don't know. It's so dependent on what everybody wants to do, but we never get there if we stay tethered to what's safe and easy.
What about vision? I found that once you get to that position as a business owner, or as somebody who started to scale, and it's cooking, it's going along well, vision casting is one of the struggles that I've had, to where like I've always just kind of just gone, like I've had a little bit of a roadmap, a little bit of vision, but not a grandiose vision. And I've realized more recently, I think that's held me back in some ways, because once I get to a point where I'm scaling, then I kind of know what to do. I'm not sure what like role to take on or where to put my attention. You have any tips for like vision casting? I don't know if that's out of this context.
Oh, no, it's completely, because again, that goes back to the foundation of like, now that your business is foundationally solid, who are you as a human being, and where do you want to go as a business owner? And I think this is where surrounding yourself with non-web design resources, getting into other communities that are maybe entrepreneurial, but maybe not entrepreneurial. I listened to this podcast called To Be Magnetic, and it's all about manifestation. And they talk about having expanders, traveling, being with people that have bigger, different visions than you, and spending some really time out of the day to day and letting your mind wander. What resonates, what is compelling for you, what of your personal hobbies have you neglected in the scaling process? A lot of times, this is not a prescription, but a lot of times you get to the scaling and you're like, oh, my health is a little out of whack here. And, I'm going to pull a Zuckerberg and like go take CrossFit and get super ripped. But I think this is like vision casting. But I think vision casting is only as good as the expansion that you're around. Some people really want to give back in nonprofits and they want their agencies to create legacy and community wealth and generational wealth. And others say that it's so I can build a second home or a cabin in the woods so I can go back and be a soloist one day. It's so dependent on personal, but I think getting outside of your comfort zone and getting outside of the people you spend time with regularly and your common networks is the way to expand your horizon of what's possible so you can do that vision casting.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. That definitely gives me some clarity for, like how to go about just, basic vision casting.
And I would say get into nature, reconnect to, you're never going to create your vision sitting at your desk. Your desk is so context dependent. Your desk is where the work happens. And, go travel, go be somewhere else, go be out in nature. I say nature because that's really what can fuel us. I think this, and none of your best creative work happens when you're sitting like at the keyboard being like, I need to be creative now.
Yeah. This is my creative block. Big idea. Come to me. Never happens.
No.
It's always in the shower, or you're on a drive, or you're somewhere where like, I shouldn't be on my phone, but I got to write this down or I'm going to forget it.
Yeah. But take us, and protecting that white space is so important, because when I was in corporate, I had a vision for what I wanted, and my vision was like constrained by what I saw and who I talked to. And I talked to the same 10 people every day in my literally the same box every day. And it was only when I freed myself from that box that I could then start to follow the rabbit holes and follow what was curious and resonant for me. And that took me down so many different paths that led me to where I am today. But you can't do it when I'm going to vision for 2 hours on a Friday morning. No, you can't. You got to create much more space in that, which is why it's so important that you don't get sucked in and trapped into the day-to-day. If you're really going to scale, you got to make it so that you don't have to check in all the time.
Love that. I feel like you're coaching me, so I want to take the remainder of this conversation for some free coaching with you.
Love it.
What about when you get to the point where you almost need to scale back a little bit with expenses and contractors? I asked that because I'm kind of in this place now where I have, just being transparent, my numbers aren't what they were last year. So I'm like, and a lot of that is not a surprise. I haven't done as many launches or pushes or have seasons of hustled like I did over the past couple of years. And I'm going to do that moving forward. But I have realized I'm probably overspending in some areas that just aren't quite paying off. And I'm realizing it now as I'm looking at the numbers. So my plan is just to scale back on some stuff with some social media strategies and marketing, and even some internal things that just we're doing some stuff with the video version of the podcast, which I just don't, my editor is about double the time. We really don't need to be doing that. It's not really paying off. So what about this stage? That my goal is just to scale that back a little bit, not work with anybody, but just scale back those tasks to be able to kind of realign things. Do you have any thoughts about my type of situation? Because I'm sure it's common when you're scaling and things are cooking, but then at some point maybe it starts to backtrack a little bit.
That's the as you climb the mountain, you hit a summit, and then there's the controlled descent, and you have to make sure that as you walk down, you don't fall down the mountain, as I have actually physically done. But this is the point where I think having a really solid cash forecast is really important. What does your project pipeline look like? What does it need to look like? What's the health of your marketing channels? And so creating that forward-looking financial forecast. What is your team expenditures? And then really starting to pare back. What activities are you doing that result in leads? What activities are you doing? Which projects are the most profitable? What marketing activities and sales activities result in the most leads? And really starting to say, I'll sacrifice the 1 or 2 leads from this channel because every one of my other channels is where I'm getting the biggest bang for the buck. So it's Pareto principle. 80% of the impact comes from 20% of the tasks. So how can you start killing off the zombie projects and the channels and the expenditures that are just not giving you any return? And that's why tracking metrics, and again, as you scale, where do your clients come from? What are your channels? What are your input metrics, leading metrics, so that you can then make better choices about and know, okay, if I cut this, what kind of impact do I think it's going to have on my future forecast? And then what does my team need to look like to support that?
This is a great reminder for me, and I'm sure everybody, to ask your clients, how did you hear about us? How did you get here? That is such an enlightening question when you have a chance to do that. Yeah, because nothing tells the data like somebody who's actually like, oh yeah, I found you on YouTube, got onto your podcast, and blah, 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 blah.
And we want to look at the expenditures of our clients. Which projects take the most time? Which clients do we like to work with the best? Because you get to start again, like at that pick and choose when you're kind of descending quick. That one is where you're going to want to make sure you don't immediately slash your whole team and slash all your expenses. And I think there's a controlled descent, which we want. There's the uncontrolled consent where your pipeline dried up and now you just have to like slash and burn. We want to be avoiding that. So when you're at that scale point, you need to be keeping an eye on the forward-looking outlook on a regular basis so that you get to choose versus being forced into making some harder choices than you would otherwise want.
I love this idea of a controlled descent. I needed to hear this because that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm like, forecast wise, I have some very big things up ahead and I'm very confident about, but at the same time, because I've had a few leaner months than usual, it has made me think like, yeah, like I almost wasn't in a position where I needed to look at this stuff, but it reminds me that even when things are going really good, you still have to look at the data and see what's working. So what a great reminder. I'm sure I'm not alone for anyone who's scaling.
You are not alone. The amount of I come from the, a little bit of the entrepreneurial online business world, and like cohort-based courses aren't selling like they used to be. And B2B sales, there's a longer sales cycle. So knowing what the activities are that generate those results and being able to double down on those, and being laser focused on this is the bloat that I picked up over a while of scaling, and it's time to become a little leaner in the business. But it's all about, again, not making check from the hip decisions. It's about being thoughtful and deliberate to say, yeah, if I make this, am I going to like cause irreparable harm? If so, like maybe like if this is this a reversible decision? We want to try to limit the amount of irreversible decisions we make.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah. And I'll just be frank. For me, a lot of it is like my Instagram. I'm not sure. I think Instagram is a great relationship builder. I'm not finding that people are finding me on Instagram.
Terrible nurture these days.
Yeah. Or for discoverability, it's not something, and that's where like it's a big channel. And by Instagram, I kind of mean Facebook too. It's kind of both comparable for me because we use Meta to distribute to both. But I am finding a lot of time with the team is going into like resources there, but I'm like, it just doesn't seem to be worth it right now with the amount of repurposing we're doing. So I'm thinking about stripping down like some of the podcast promotion. Essentially, that's like one area that I'm personally looking at, and just doing like one post a week rather than several following up on it.
Yeah. Instagram has shifted from discovery to nurture. And so the question would be, depending on your audience, where else are they spending time with this? That's more of a discovery engine. So, is it time to like think about LinkedIn? Is it time to like double down on the YouTube? Because that does have more of a discovery element to it than does the Instagram.
Nailed it. That's what I'm doing.
Oh, good. Yay. Yeah. And so I think these platforms, especially when we're doing social, especially if you're going to think about doing email, then what's your one or two discovery engines? And then what's your one or two nurture? And I see too many people have a community and an Instagram and a LinkedIn and a podcast and an email. And I'm like, okay, I don't think you need it. And then they don't have any attract discovery platforms. And I'm like, all right, well, you're spending all this time doing nurture and very little time doing new discovery.
Good point. Yep. Yeah. How timely. I literally just today at the time of recording this, I launched an episode on what channels to market, just because it was kind of like a brain dump for me on something I'm going through right now, like how to market, where to market. And I heard this analogy that really helped clarify this for me, which is to choose kind of like in academia, you would choose a major and have a minor or two and then have electives. And I love that idea of any sort of marketing channel. Could be for both discoverability or nurturing, and that is to have a major one or two main channels. Then you'll have the ones below that get less priority, less attention, and different functions too. Yeah. It's also a great time to remind everyone that there is a difference between discoverability channels and nurture channels. YouTube, discoverability, podcast. Actually, for me, it's kind of 50-50. It's been interesting. I did not think people were finding me from the podcast, but the amount of people in my membership who have said, I searched web design and podcast and found you. I'm like, oh, interesting. So this for me kind of blurs the middle. But then newsletter, 100%. nurture.
Yep.
So that's kind of where I'm personally heading is those three.
Exactly. And I would say that the part that's usually missing for a lot of marketing is actually inviting people to have an experience with you. That we tend to market push, but we don't actually say, I have 2 spots available. I have one in September and one in October. Would you like the spots? And like doing personal reach outs to past clients and people who had a sales call, but maybe weren't ready, or the people that always click on the emails in the links in your emails. Sometimes people just need to hear, oh, they have a spot. It's not scarcity for scarcity's sake. It's like you're an oversubscribed in demand web designer. So how can we make it clear and obvious that you're taking clients now and how many slots do you have? Because that's how I've joined a couple of different, I've had a coach that said, oh, I have 2 spots available for this working with me in this program. I'm like, I want one. You've been on my mind. And I know if I don't get it now, I won't get it for another 2 to 3 months.
Gotcha. Interesting. I love that idea. Yeah. To your point earlier about the courses and cohort programs kind of being a little bit different now. Yeah. I've heard that across the board. And I do think there's, from what I've seen in this sector of the industry, there's more work that is going into getting somebody to kind of cross the finish line into a program or into a course. So this idea of opening up call slots or connection times, even I didn't really think about that, but that little concept of looking at the links that are clicked in emails, if it's the same person over and over, what a perfect opportunity to send them a personal Loom video and just say, hey, I know you've been engaged with some stuff recently. I've got some slots open to answer any questions you have to see if we'd be a good fit if you'd like to lock one in. I love that idea. I think I'm going to take that.
Yeah, I think it's all about how can you be, I picked this up from a different podcast, but how can you gather with your people? And so I've been seeing a lot of creator roundtables lately where you kind of open up like get a web designer's Q&A and people come over and over. And sometimes they just come for the free advice. And then you're like, that's great. Like, I'm glad you could do it on your own. But for those of you who want to move faster or move with more confidence, or just you don't have time to do it because you're scaling and you want to outsource what you're doing, people want to be able to, especially with web design, they want to know you. I think they want to know that you're, like you have said before, that you're not going to ghost them like their last web designer did.
Yeah. Absolutely. All these strategies, absolute gold for being able to find the right marketing channel that's either discoverable or nurturing, follow up with them. Yeah. I mean, web design in particular is such a personal type service. I mean, there's this resurgence in this term webmaster, even though people aren't saying it. It really is like companies and businesses want somebody that they can rely on and trust on to be their online person. So there's so much opportunity for that. So I would say, yeah, get as personal as you can. Like go ham on the personal videos and personal touches where, maybe a couple of years ago, didn't need to do it as much, but it's a great reminder.
Yeah. Well, I'm wishing you the best on as your controlled descent, but it is challenging to like back away from the status tax that comes with the vanity metrics. But this is, especially if you're going into a season with other big investments and big shifts, kind of scaling back to then regrow in a stronger, different way is really powerful and not a decision that as many people take consciously as much as they're thrust into it.
You said it right there, regrow. And my YouTube channel is the first thing that came to mind because that's how I built my brand. And I just have not been able to keep up with it in the way of tutorials and videos, but I've realized more recently, like that is the number one discoverability channel for me. And I've got to take that way more seriously than playing around with threads, which is fun and nice. But with like a few hundred people follow me on threads versus 30,000+ on YouTube, yeah. I think I should probably focus on YouTube if I were coaching myself.
I think you should focus on YouTube too. And I don't even know web design, but I'm totally going to follow along and subscribe to your YouTube channel.
Well, you'll see this interview because we do post these on the YouTube. These go on YouTube. I just, the strategy for like the tips and tricks and things like that are coming back. So that term regrow though, that's literally what I'm doing right now. And I'm speaking openly about this because I hope this helps give some context on what to do in this type of situation. I hope this is kind of a good case study because this is literally what I'm working through right now. I mean, honestly, Jessica, we laid out a really good game plan here with preparing starting to scale and know where to focus and what to do initially, when the time is right to begin to hire and delegate, what to do once you get past that point when it comes to vision and what your role is going to be, and then up to this point where there's a lot going on with the scaling, and then sometimes you have to reel it back and pivot a little bit or regrow certain channels and figuring out where to market. So this has been awesome. This has been a really, really well-rounded conversation with this idea of figuring out what to do in each one of these growth stages. I'll leave it to you for a final thought. I don't know if maybe you would have an encouragement for somebody in either one of these stages. But actually, let me ask you this. What is your favorite stage? Starting to scale, scaling, and then vision casting going to the next level, or, being a little more advanced in scaling and then figuring out what to do after that?
I think my personal favorite stage is sometimes like the beginning stage, because then you don't know what you don't know yet, because that's the stage where it feels a little easier because you're still in dreamland. That's my favorite. Like, who doesn't love to dream of I have dreamed of my future YouTube channel, my podcast, I've kind of limited myself. I'm like, I can't do all those things at once. But I think the stage that I think is underappreciated is this acclimation stage, which is you're getting ready to scale, but you need to park it at altitude for a little bit to start getting your processes dialed, to really make your marketing pipeline robust. That's the scale that no one, the part where you're like, I could scale, but you don't, and you prepare for the next stage. That's the stage that doesn't get any love because everyone's focused on scaling. And I'm like, no. Make more money, get a cash buffer, bank some cash in your business by being a soloist, be oversubscribed, build that wait list, get your processes ready. And then you're able to scale. Please don't try to scale if you don't have, 3 months of cash buffer for your expenses in the bank account. Just don't do it. That's just bad news bears all around.
What a great point to end off on. That little framework right there was the perfect little condensed version of this conversation. So Jessica, thank you so much for your expertise and your insight on this today. I love talking scaling. It's different for everybody. And it seems like every time I talk with a business consultant of sorts, there's always something unique in each way to go about this. So it's been really cool hearing, your experience with this and your side of things. Where you would like people to go to connect with you if they would like to see what you're up to or connect with you?
Yeah. If you want to learn more, you can go to my website, jessicalackey.com/welcome. That has links to some free resources, and you can follow me on all the socials.
Awesome. And I can't believe I didn't mention this because I meant to, but I have to say my favorite aspect of your website is the term toxic productivity.
Oh, yeah.
That is my favorite because I'm such a proponent of priority being so much more important than productivity. So I just wanted to say, I don't know if you came up with that copy or somebody else, but well done. That's a great way to phrase that.
I came up with that because I lived it for the first half of my professional career.
Toxic productivity. That's going to have to be round 2 because I'm curious about that. So that'll be a great podcast for the next one. Toxic productivity. Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for the time. Looking forward to round 2 again sometime.
Looking forward to round 2.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jessica Lackey. Look, growth is funny because as I've talked to a lot of people who are growing their businesses at any level, there's always discomfort, and it makes sense. You could get as practical as you want. Like when you are growing, I've got little kiddos, they're all growing, and there's always some growing pains, literally growing pains. And the growing pains in business are literal. They can be painful. So Jessica was a great guide in this conversation. She has more resources for you if you check out her website, jessicalackey.com. And again, be sure to go to jessicalackey.com/welcome, where she's got some free stuff for you. And I mentioned this before we went live, but she is going to be doing a guest training every month in my community, Web Designer Pro. We have a guest speaker, a guest training for a certain subject. Jessica's going to be in later this year in December doing a training on scaling and really taking a more visual and kind of in-depth look into this topic, and it'll be followed by a live Q&A too. So if you've yet to join Web Designer Pro, that's just another benefit of joining Pro. You get all my courses, the incredible community coaching with me, and this hidden gem gold of a training library that is now 29 trainings deep at the time of recording this. Each one of those is like a masterclass that we could probably charge $1,000 for. that you get just by joining Pro. So join us over there, joshhall.co/pro. And until the next episode, friends, I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know if you enjoyed it. I'm still pretty active on Instagram or Facebook. Share it there if you would. Tag me at Josh Hall Co. Tag me if you've been enjoying the episode. Share it out. I do see all those. I would love to connect with you there as well. Thank you for being a listener. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, there's your call to action. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode because, man, we have some more awesome ones coming. So get ready because we're halfway through the year. We're well over halfway through the year, but there's some good ones coming up. All right, friends. See you on the next one.